first. This state visit sort of encapsulates what has been the hard work of the last perhaps 20 years. We're talking about defense deals, jet engines being manufactured in India. We're talking about armed drone deals, the Predators for India. What is your big 30,000 feet view of today's visit?
Well, I remember not too long ago being the U.S. ambassador to India, and we had our very first state dinner under President Obama for Prime Minister Singh. And then they turned around in India, New Delhi, and had a state dinner for President Obama. Those were the foundations and the pillars being set by a Democrat, which were continued by a Republican administration, to deepen the strategic relationship here, to broaden the people-to-people ties that we're so proud of, to expand the horizons of this relationship into space and into skilling and talent training and schools for our youngest people. This is a terribly exciting time. I am not using hyperbole to describe this visit as a watershed moment in human history, where these two democracies are cooperating together. And this is a visit where technology is the springboard leading to more successes for us and our societies, for peace and prosperity going forward. Those are not going to be overused terms for the deliverables and for the outcomes in this. And I'm very excited to be going to the White House tonight to celebrate the people-to-people ties between our two countries.
I want to take off on that technology point and ask Ambassador Atul Keshap, now as chair of the USIBC, I'm sure you're getting the ringside view on this, whether it's technology about manufacturing jet engines in India, technology, semiconductor technology, and big American companies investing in semiconductor tech in India. How do you see that sort of transforming this relationship? Because that has an impact in every sphere, from the geostrategic to the geoeconomic, and of course, when it comes to improving the lives of our peoples.
Well, thank you for the question. But first, I'd like to take a moment to talk about what I just experienced. I was very fortunate to be among a group of people who were right at the south portico of the White House. We were probably just steps away from the podium where the two leaders gave their remarks. And I have to tell you, as an Indian American who has spent much of my entire working life trying to advance the ties between the people of India and the people of America and our two great democracies, that moment on the South Lawn with the massed bands and honor guards of the United States of America rendering tribute and honor to a state visitor from India, the Prime Minister of India, and the national anthems playing was really moving. To see 5,000 Indian Americans and Americans from all walks of life honoring India and the President of the United States, the Vice President, Secretary of State, and so many other friends and luminaries there who have worked very hard from both governments to bring us to this moment. It was extremely moving. And I was very privileged to be there and to witness that. And I think that there is truly a great deal that our two governments can do together and our peoples can do together. The governments will announce a whole raft of initiatives and deliverables, and I'll let them make the news on that. But what I will say is that after having worked so hard to overcome our strategic differences, including through the nuclear deal when I worked at the embassy in an earlier era, and having now worked to accelerate our economic relationship and to power it from 200 billion to 500 billion, which we need to do urgently, the new chapter in our relationship is the technological convergence. And whether it's semiconductors or defense or cybersecurity, outer space, telecoms, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, these are the important deep tech, future tech technologies that the member companies of USIBC, Indian and American, will work on with the full endorsement of the governments to try to ensure that whatever technologies affect our lives in the future, they are built on a software of free people and free enterprise, of democratic values, of Indian and American values that will help ensure the peace and happiness of the entire world and our two peoples.
I want to bring in Ambassador Arun Singh as well. How much of the conversations that are happening inside the White House right now, whether it's between the two principals or their respective delegations, how much of the long shadow of an aggressive and assertive China is going to be sort of discussed in that meeting? Because many of these outcomes are going to be judged from that prism, whether it's the jet engine deal, the Predators, so on and so forth. A lot of it is going to be seen as potentially sending a message to Beijing.
I think there are two aspects related to the cooperation that has been pursued between India and the US. The first is both, even if the China dimension were not there, both countries would benefit from the partnership. The Indian economy is already the fifth largest globally. It will be the third largest by the end of the decade. So there is enough opportunity for both countries to just look at the partnership through which their economies, their technological strengths would grow. But that having been said, clearly the China dimension is important. The US has said that China is their main economic, technological, and military challenge, and that China has the intent and the capability to replace the US in the international system, and India faces its own challenges related to China. So that is certainly would be something that would be discussed. But very interestingly, this is not something new. Recently, the conversation between Prime Minister Vajpayee and President Bush in November 2001 has been declassified. And when you look at that conversation, it seems in their 1-hour meeting, almost 90% of the time was devoted to the challenge from China. So, and this predates, discussions related to the nuclear deal and what will come from that. So way back from that time, and President Bush in his own campaign had described China as a strategic competitor. So the China dimension is certainly a factor that will be there in the conversation.
It's quite amazing, as they say, the more things seem to change, the more they remain the same. If they were talking about it 20 years ago and they're still going to be talking about it. I want to ask Ambassador Roemer about this. But it's not like, it's all hunky-dory between the US and India. It's not like on all issues, both sides are on the same page. On Russia-Ukraine, for example, India's taken a very different position. India continues to buy Russian oil. India used to import less than 1% of its oil from Russia before the war began. Right now, it's anywhere between 25 to 30%, between a quarter and a third. On that issue, there is serious differences. And also, I'm sure, Ambassador Roemer, you must have seen this new view in the Beltway. A lot of folks, actually tell us. There was another piece about how India and America don't really share values. What they share is interests. Will all of this be discussed as well when the principals are talking? And would these differences just, be there in the room? Or would there be an attempt to try and bridge them as well?
Well, that's a great question, and let me answer it very directly. Prime Minister Modi was interviewed by the Wall Street Journal prior to his visit to America just a few days ago. And he said there is unprecedented trust between the United States and India and the two peoples. When you fill that coin of the realm, which is diplomacy, is trust, and building that trust in relationships across the board, you can talk about the strategic convergence with China. You can build coalitions with other like-minded countries in the region, such as the Philippines and Singapore and Indonesia, Japan and South Korea, through the Quad, the great work of the deepening relationship in the Quad. Those things are all fairly easy to talk about these days. But because so much naturally to us, and we do share so many values as a democracy, as a people, as two countries devoted to peace and prosperity and sovereign rights in the world, we can talk about sensitive issues, and we should, quite frankly. I wake up every morning in America, and we have two vast oceans and two friends to the north and the south. India wakes up to a very different geographic world, with threats all around them. The United States recognizes that. So when we talk to India about purchasing Russian oil, we want to express our concerns about that invasion of Ukraine. We want to talk to them about putting a cap on oil prices so that money that India spends on oil does not go toward the war machine in Russia. We have had these frank